Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we are on location in Jaffrey, British Columbia at the I.D.E.A.L community. This is an incredibly beautiful place. It's been a few years since we've been up here to shoot and to enjoy this very rich, very deep community that is involved in a spiritual teaching that is it just kind of gets to the root and to the height of all matters esoteric and spiritual, not to mention material. And in fact, that's the subject of today's meeting with Natacha Kolesar, who is the founder of this community. And Natacha is the person who was kind enough to introduce me to total biology, which has been a subject of many of our interviews over the past couple of years. Well, Natacha was studying with the founder of total biology, Claude Sabat, in Montreal, and was so enamored of the teaching and its application to herself personally as well as to her community that over time she integrated it into this community and has, as a good friend, taught me about it as well and introduced me to Claude Sabat et al. So since then, we have been having classes in New York, as many of you know, and now in this interview, we're going to be going into some depth about looking at the relationship of spirituality to the teachings of total biology. So Natacha, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you again.
Thank you.
You have done something really very notable in introducing a certain body of work into your community that wasn't naturally part of its fabric, except that the teachings are completely complementary. Could you just comment on how you see, how you feel that total biology is helping your community in its spiritual development?
So the community is composed by people, by persons, and each person is as a cell. Exactly the same for humanity. We are all the cells of humanity. And so a community could be considered as an organ or as a little system. And we cannot take care, we cannot apply, and we cannot be completely in spirituality if we didn't free some paths, some way on a physical level where our physical body is extremely important. For our soul, who comes and leaves and comes again, physical body is the principal instrument. And with today's science or even medical science, which is very good to help immediately in many, many cases, we see the situation is a little bit complicated because we have more and more illnesses, diseases, and we cannot find fast the answers or the
successful treatments, right?
Or the solutions. And what total biology brings is that the real conflict or real problem is not on a physical level, but on a psychic level. And physical level will just express, describe what kind of problem we have. Because each organ, each type of cancer or diabetes or
any degenerative disease or beyond
disease will express where is family, genealogical, or personal conflict. And if we resolve that problem, then we free the body. The sickness just disappeared, and we call it healing. And then we are really able to study or to apply or to assimilate some spiritual methods, some spiritual things.
So in other words, what the teaching of total biology really is, in a sense, you could say, is spiritual by definition, in that there is an inherent understanding that the body is essentially a printout, if you will, a physical printout of a psychic pain, a psychic issue or conflict.
Executor of what happens on a psychic level.
Yes.
And when we can know many, many wonderful things. For example, how to meditate, how to do some yogas, or how to practice many things. But if we are not comfortable in our physical body or with some emotional problems, it will be not really spiritual.
In other words, it's as though those spiritual practices that so many people are engaged in are occurring on top of an already troubled psychic and physical problem.
And we have precise steps for the spiritual practices. For example, for centuries and centuries, we were always a little bit spiritual. But first step or first method that we use is to observe. We observed many, many millions of things, and then to withdraw a conclusion, a synthesis. So we know how to analyze. We know in reality we have incredible knowledge, but very often what is the most difficult, how to withdraw a lesson, how to withdraw a resume, a synthesis, because if we do it, then we never repeat the same mistake, the same problem. And with observation, we spend lives. But then when we really start spiritual work, then we have to observe ourselves. How is our behavior? What kind of feelings we have, and what kind of thoughts we nourish and
put forth.
So to start to observe oneself is the most important bridge to a real spiritual practices, which continues with meditation, contemplation, identification, etc.
Exactly.
But
deepening a spiritual experience. But if there are blocks on an emotional level, then there is no assimilation, just like with food.
No.
And many people who encounter total biology say, well, I can heal that issue, be it cancer or another serious illness, by changing the diet or by increasing exercise and reducing stress. Well, all of those things, in fact, do have an impact, but they're always going to be limited and restricted if their assimilation and usefulness, if the emotional blocks or issues remain in place.
Exactly. And when we discover what is the real cause of our state, inner state, emotional, mental, or physical, it means that there is a high demand to change the consciousness. But we cannot change the consciousness if we don't change some beliefs, if we don't change some habits, if we don't change some methods that we used in our family, in our religion, in our philosophy, ideology, etc., for sometimes for centuries. So it demands changes.
Yes.
And in the front of changes, we always fear many things because our previous experiences were not necessarily happy, because our knowledge was not yet sufficient. It means we were a little bit more ignorant. And then, of course, we will fear new things and the changes. So
and be suspicious of these.
Oh, yes, very much.
And not to mention, Natasha, the ego is at stake here as well in the face of any kind of change. And even if someone's in pain, if that has become familiar and reliable, it could be that changing even that is not worth it to them.
Yes, and what we change with the knowledge, even if karmically there are some things that we have to go through and suffer, with the change of attitude, everything changes. Because we turn the energies toward
Ourselves.
inner ourselves, and then we have all necessary tools, material, instruments, devices, etc., especially energies, how to transmute immediately what is painful. So we start in reality be alchemist. When we discover a real cause, when we change the attitude, and when we turn toward ourselves very precious energies. When we